Have you ever had that strange feeling that something is happening behind the scenes, as if there's a level of the game you haven't unlocked yet? Sharkston Invests always believed he'd seen it all in the world of investing. Basic funds, obvious stocks, popular products that any beginner stumbles upon. Until one day he sensed something different in the air, almost like a whiff of opportunity that had never reached him before. It was at that moment that a question began to hammer in his mind. Why? Do some investors have access to things that simply don't appear to most? If this has crossed your mind too, you're not alone. And stick with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might surprise you, perhaps more than you imagine. Sharkston had always been disciplined, studious, and attentive to so-called market opportunities. But suddenly he realized that some investors were talking about investments he had never even seen. It wasn't just a difference in knowledge, it was a difference in access that affected him. Something's going on in there, something that's not visible to the average investor. And when a shark becomes suspicious, you can be sure there's something big hidden. That's when the unease began to grow, as if an invisible door had been closed right in front of him. A door that led to something bigger, smarter, more profitable, and completely out of reach for someone who is still at the beginning of building wealth. Perhaps you felt this way too. Studying, following the stock market, investing with discipline, and yet realizing there's another universe with premium investments, mentorship programs that only cater to those who have already achieved significant success, and opportunities that never appear in the app for those starting from scratch. It's almost as if there are two worlds within personal finance. The world of basic offerings, accessible to everyone, and the silent world where the real sharks swim. This contrast creates an uncomfortable feeling, because you work hard, seek knowledge, make smart choices, but it still feels like something is missing. Have you ever experienced this? Sharkston passed by, and when he noticed this pattern, something changed in the way he viewed the system. He began to question why some investments are so rare, so exclusive, so carefully handed out only to certain people. That's when the mystery began to unravel, not as a magic trick, but as a silent logic governing the market. Certain. Doors only open when you reach a specific level of consistency, discipline, and accumulation. And the more Sharkston investigated, the clearer it became that money isn't the only factor. There's a whole behind-the-scenes dynamic that makes some opportunities circulate only among more experienced investors. What Sharkston discovered that day was not just a new investment, but confirmation that there is an upper floor in the financial universe, a place where things really happen, and where invitations aren't sent to just anyone. And as that scent of opportunity grew stronger, he began to understand that he was about to walk through that invisible door, a door that changes everything for those who learn to find it. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject. And as Sharkston continued his silent investigation, trying to understand why some opportunities only appeared for a select group, he began to realize that this feeling of being on the outside wasn't just his. Many people who are truly dedicated to learning about wealth building also carry this inner doubt, this feeling of knocking on the right door, but with no one opening it. And that's precisely why I love it so much. When you share in the comments what you're feeling, what you've already experienced, or even the frustrations you've had on your financial journey. If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment here about what has touched you the most so far. Because when you share your experience, it not only helps me understand your real struggles, but also strengthens this community that grows precisely through sharing. And, honestly, every like you give and every subscription you make has a direct impact on the reach of this type of message. When you click like, the algorithm understands that this content is relevant, that it deserves to reach other people who are also trying to open their own doors in the world of finance. And when you subscribe to the channel, you show me and the platform itself that this is the kind of conversation that needs to continue happening, that you want to be part of this journey with Sharkston and everyone else who is growing here. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people who need to hear these truths that nobody tells them. Therefore, if you're still feeling that connection, that curiosity, or even that unease about realizing there's an upper floor in the financial market, participate. Your voice matters. Your engagement keeps this space alive, strong, and moving the conversation forward. And as Sharkston continued to follow that scent of opportunity, something started to become even clearer. And as Sharkston progressed through this silent investigation, he began to see the financial market in a way that few people can. Not as a shelf of products thrown haphazardly, but as a multi-story building, each accessible only to those who have already passed certain stages of their own financial journey. He described this scenario almost as if revealing a secret map. On the ground floor are those basic products that anyone encounters in the first few months of investing interest, options that shine because they are easy, fast, popular, but that rarely change anyone's life. It's where almost everyone starts, full of simple promises, but with little real impact on building wealth. As you go up, you reach the first floor, where the products are a bit more interesting, with better rates, more calculated risks, and a slightly more selective approach. Here, a kind of natural filter already exists. Only those who have made conscious decisions, who have left impulsiveness aside and begun to develop a more mature mindset about money, arrive. It's the intermediate level, the phase in which the investor realizes that investing is not about fads, but about consistency. Sharkston saw this as the moment when a person begins to distance themselves from the crowd and embraces a more strategic vision. But it's when he looks at the upper floors that the story takes on a different hue. It's up there, at the top, that the strongest opportunities circulate. Restricted funds, mentorships that shape trajectories, private investments that don't appear on any platform, silent invitations that aren't announced to the public. It's the Sharks zone, where information circulates differently, more directly, more deeply, more aligned with the true building of wealth. And when Sharkston says that it's not that they hide it, it's that you don't have access yet, he's not speaking judgmentally. He speaks with the clarity of someone who understands that the market operates in layers, and each layer demands a new level of preparation, discipline, and vision. This understanding brought him a curious feeling, almost as if he had discovered a hidden truth about how wealth is truly formed. It's not just about choosing the right investment, but about understanding the environment in which each opportunity exists. It's as if each floor represents a stage of personal and financial transformation, where maturity opens doors that haste could never open. Sharkston realized that many people become frustrated, not because they lack ability, but because they are still struggling on the wrong floor, trying to access windows that only open when the investor has already proven consistency throughout their journey. And as this vision solidified in his mind, a new question began to emerge. How exactly does someone climb those floors without relying on luck, connections, or invisible privileges? Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because understanding this dynamic completely changes how you see the opportunities that cross your path and the impact each decision has on your financial journey. Before continuing, comment below. I'm on this journey too. Sharkston always believed that success in the investment world depended solely on study, strategy, and good decisions, until he realized there was a specific point where everything changed almost silently. He began to notice that after an investor reaches $250,000 in accumulated funds, something different happens behind the scenes. It's not an announcement. It's not a flashing message on the screen. It's not an automatic celebration. It's more subtle, almost imperceptible, like an invisible code that activates new doors. This number, which many people see only as money, acts as a badge, a silent signal that tells the market, this investor is consistent, disciplined, reliable. And that's exactly when banks, platforms, and managers start looking at you differently, as someone who has already proven sufficient maturity to handle larger opportunities. Sharkston realized this when he noticed that suddenly invitations started appearing in his inbox, things that simply didn't exist for him before. These were private meetings, exclusive reports, in-depth analyses by experts who rarely speak to those just starting out. Restricted funds, previously invisible, began to emerge as if they had always been there, waiting for the right moment to appear. More robust investment proposals, with better conditions, began to appear. It was as if the market dashboard had unlocked a new tab, full of high-tier products that simply hadn't shown themselves before. And perhaps the most striking aspect of this transformation was the change in the behavior of serious mentors, those experienced investors who don't waste time with curious onlookers. They started responding, initiating conversations, and guiding paths. Sharkston realized that, at that level, The game is no longer about chasing information, but about being seen as someone who has already done what needed to be done to move up a level. Because the $250,000 doesn't just represent an accumulated amount. It represents years of choices, sacrifices, and a mindset aligned with wealth building. It's the silent seal of consistency. This milestone reveals a hidden truth about the market. It opens up to those who demonstrate maturity, not just interest. And this discovery had a huge impact on Sharkston because it showed that access was never truly denied. It just needed to be earned. The journey to $250K is less about formula and more about financial character, about the ability to maintain discipline even when haste tries to steal focus. It's as if the market is saying, without words, that it's only worth giving certain opportunities to those who have proven they know how to take care of their own future. And when Sharkston understood this, something inside him clicked. He began to see patterns where before he saw chance, he began to realize that opportunities follow a much deeper and more selective logic than he imagined. And the more he connected the pieces, the clearer it became that this invisible badge was not a privilege for the few, but a natural stage in the journey of those who choose to build true wealth. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because understanding this shift in perception is essential to understanding what comes next and how this door continues to open as the investor evolves. Before continuing, comment below. That makes sense to me. When Sharkston finally stepped through that invisible door, the feeling was so profound, it almost felt physical. It was as if all the silence he had always perceived in the market suddenly gained a voice. Nothing there was loud, flashy, or ostentatious. On the contrary, everything was discreet, organized, almost too elegant to be noticed by someone still chasing their first opportunities. And it was precisely this change of environment that made Sharkston understand, in a flash, that he had entered another level of the financial journey. The first things that caught his attention were the rates. Lower, smarter, more aligned with those who already know what they're doing. They weren't the standardized rates everyone receives. They were adjusted, thoughtful conditions, almost tailor-made. Soon after came the private investments, the kind you don't see on any platform. They didn't have an Invest Now button. They weren't advertised. They didn't appear in rankings of the best investments of the month. They were opportunities shown only to those already part of this silent circle, almost like exclusive invitations given only to those who demonstrate consistency. Sharkston watched this with a mixture of curiosity and slight disbelief. It wasn't theory. It wasn't rumor. It existed. It always existed, but it simply wasn't revealed to those who weren't ready. And then came the meetings, small, focused, with experienced investors who spoke a different language, a language that wasn't complicated, but carried a maturity impossible to imitate. They talked about the long term, like people talk about the weather, discussed decisions like people exchange ideas about known paths, and shared revelations about the market's inner workings that never reached the masses. There was no rush, no fear, only clarity. And in that environment, Sharkston felt something he had never felt before. Belonging. Not because someone called him, but because he had finally risen high enough to see what had always been there. With each new opportunity that arose before him, the mix of emotions grew. There was surprise, yes, because some of the offers were so different from anything he had ever seen that it seemed like another universe. There was also indignation, because being stuck on the bottom floor for so long, while that universe above existed, seemed unfair, almost as if someone had hidden a truth. But this indignation quickly transformed into empowerment. It was as if a part of him said, "Now I understand the game. Now I know why some managed to multiply and others remain trapped." And this feeling didn't come from arrogance, but from the clear perception that the financial world has never been equal for everyone, and that access has always depended on maturity and discipline before depending on money. This moment marked a turning point for him. Sharkston realized that his entire journey up to that point had been necessary for him to clearly see this other side. He understood that there is an invisible impact on how the market selects who is ready for greater opportunities, and that this selection is not based on favoritism, but on preparedness. The more he explored that space, the clearer it became that experiencing those behind-the-scenes aspects is completely different from just hearing about them. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because understanding what he found there opens the way to understanding how these doors continue to open as you evolve on your financial journey. Before continuing, comment below. I'm on this journey too. When Sharkston began to calmly analyze everything he had seen there, a powerful understanding took shape. That world wasn't reserved for financial geniuses, secret heirs, or people with privileged connections. It was reserved for those who choose to walk with discipline. He realized that many people look at the 250K mark as something distant, almost unattainable, when in reality it represents less a number and more a mindset. True transformation happens long before the money arrives. It begins when a person learns to say no to what sabotages them, when they stop making impulsive decisions motivated by ego or immediacy, and when they begin to see the future with the clarity of someone who understands the impact of each choice. Sharkston always repeated to himself that there's no magic leap in wealth building, only rhythm. And that rhythm is formed through small habits, contributing a little every month, automating what can be automated, dedicating time to learning, avoiding financial distractions that seem innocent but are costly. He realized that the biggest enemy on the journey isn't the lack of opportunities, but the ease with which the market pushes distractions disguised as achievements. Financed cars that drain the budget for years, emotional debts taken on impulsively, status expenses that serve only to show something to others. All of this creates a fog that prevents a person from seeing their own path. It was precisely by observing these patterns that Sharkston understood that the path to 250K is, in fact, an exercise in consistency. It's not about choosing the perfect stock, nor about finding the miracle investment. It's about having a strategy, about understanding that wealth doesn't arise from extraordinary moments, but from the sum of coherent decisions throughout an entire journey. When he began to abandon the need to prove something to the world, money started to accumulate. When he stopped chasing shortcuts, results began to appear. When he replaced haste with a long-term vision, growth finally gained traction. And this is the part that most surprises those who haven't yet crossed that invisible door. It doesn't open because of money. It opens because of behavior. It's behavior that builds wealth and, at the same time, prepares the mindset to deal with the opportunities that come later. Sharkston realized that the market doesn't deliver ready-made doors. It observes, it tests, it measures who is ready. And when consistency accumulates, the number is merely a consequence of something much bigger. Therefore, when he finally reached that milestone, he didn't feel he had accessed a privilege. He felt he had received a logical and fair reward for every choice made in silence, away from the spotlight and away from the temptations that lead so many investors astray. And that's why he always repeats, with the firmness of someone who has lived it firsthand, the shark door is not a privilege, it's a reward for focus, for discipline, for the ability to see the long term when everything around tries to push him towards immediate and empty results. The more Sharkston understood this, the more he realized that there's a clear pattern among those who reached this point. They all consciously chose to walk this path, confronting their own impulses, old beliefs, and financial fears. This creates a kind of inner revelation, a clarity that changes not only their relationship with money, but with life itself. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because there's a detail about this journey that few people realize, and it can completely change how you see your own path. Before continuing, comment below. That makes sense to me. If you've made it this far with me, I can tell this topic has resonated with you in some way. This kind of conversation isn't for those chasing shortcuts, but for those who truly want to build something solid, conscious, and purposeful. Therefore, if this content has helped you see your financial journey more clearly, consider subscribing to the channel. That way, you can continue walking with me and Sharkston in this mindset and wealth-building process, always taking the next step with more awareness and less noise. And since you stayed until the end, and that says a lot about your determination, leave a comment below with this phrase, "I'm with you until the end." It's simple, but it creates a beautiful connection between those who are truly committed to this transformation and helps me understand who is really living this journey. If you'd like to leave a like, it makes a difference. Not as an empty gesture, but as a sign that this conversation resonated with you and that it's worthwhile to continue bringing deep and honest content like this. And before you go, there's a video here that complements this topic in a way that might further broaden your perspective on this invisible door for investors. Click and continue reading there.